Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome back to Reserved Investments, and thank you for joining me. Welcome to part 4, for those of you keeping count, of the 18,000 subscriber Q&A series. We're going to dive right in because we got a lot of great questions. Here's the first question. Sean, what are some key features that you look out for to identify organic collectibility for a new collectible in today's day and age? Okay, in order for something to have true organic collectibility, in most cases, it must be pursued, collected, and cherished by more than one generation. In the antiques and collectibles trade, we call that multi-generational collectibility. And that is necessary for something to become the next big thing. For instance, if we look at rare coins, if we look at vintage comic books, if we look at firearms, if we look at first edition books, if we look at even certain types of vintage toys, all of those items have multi-generational collectibility. That is vital for a collecting category to stand the test of time. Now, even if something has organic collectibility, it can still die out as a collectible. For instance, I don't know if you guys are aware of this, Pez dispensers became a very massively pursued collectible in the 1980s and the 1990s. And there are still people out there that collect Pez dispensers. The company has been in existence since 1927, and they're not going anywhere anytime soon. They are a massive company that got lucky producing this type of candy and these unique candy dispensers that go with it. Well, today in the year 2025, not as many people collect Pez dispensers as there were back in the 1980s and 90s pursuing this stuff. As a matter of fact, there's an excellent documentary you can watch on Netflix, at least if you live in North America, called The Pez Outlaw, that kind of details the speculative frenzy that opened up in this market during the late 1990s and the early 2000s, and how certain individuals capitalized on it. Well, spoiler alert, the market pretty much went bust. It went belly up. That said, today, Pez dispensers are still collected, but the market as a collecting category is pretty much dying out. Every year, less and less people collect Pez dispensers. This is because younger generations are not wanting to collect that collecting category. So in order for a collecting category to survive, it has to have true organic demand, meaning the people that are buying it are not just buying it as a financial or speculative investment, number one. And number two, the people who are buying it have to really like and want to own the product. And number three, if younger generations decide, hey, that's a cool product, I really like it, and they decide to collect it, now you have something long term. So if you're going to identify something that people are only buying because of the financial incentive, and that collecting category is fairly new or just came out of the gate, I would be cautious of that particular item developing a true following over the long term. Another thing we have to look at is something called multicultural collecting. If we look at Pokemon, the reason why Pokemon became a mass phenomenon is in the late 1990s when it first premiered, it was based off of a video game, number one, and number two, it wasn't just the fact that people were buying it who were truly passionate about the product. It was that it wasn't only people in one region that were buying it. Pokemon originated in Japan. It became a pop culture phenomenon first in Japan. Then when it was brought to America, it became even bigger. So now you have more than one culture that is going after that said item. That's what gives it credibility. That's what gives it organic collectibility. And even so, there's obviously more than one generations that are now collecting Pokemon cards, not just as an investment, but because they also like the products. So that's what you need to look for. If something comes out of the gate very quickly and a lot of people are interested in it only because it is a quote unquote financial investment, be wary of that particular collecting category standing the test of time. If people are buying it because they like it, because they want to own it, because they really cherish the product, And if you analyze the product and it has legs like Pokemon or Nintendo franchises, or even comic books to a certain extent, obviously that is something that younger generations might flock to. So that's really the true test. Are people only buying it as a financial investment? Is it too new? Is it too weird? Like if you look at Beanie Babies, did anybody really think that Beanie Babies were going to become a long-term thing? I mean, if so, you really need to read the books that I recommend on this channel. You guys really need to learn how the antiques and collectibles trade operates. It's just like a lot of people back around, what was it, 2017, 2018, 2019, were putting their money in Flesh and Blood. I forget when the card game originally premiered. And just because the manufacturer produced cold foil cards that they limited production of, right away people were sending them to get graded. And people in the secondary market were paying thousands of dollars for these cards. And I sit here and laugh. It's like you're spending thousands of dollars on a collectible card game that's just a few years old simply because the manufacturer limited supply. You could have easily put that money in vintage Magic the Gathering cards that we know now have organic collectability, or even Pokemon cards that we know have organic collectability. So you really have to analyze these markets properly and make sure that you're making a sound financial investment if you're investing or speculating in these items rather than following the hype. So I hope that answers your question in full. Next question. Sean, are you aware of a legendary antique toy dealer who passed away recently? And how will the antique toy market fare going forward as they lose more people like him? Okay, the person in question, I am just going to say his name because I know about this, is Tom Sage. Tom Sage is a well-known vintage and antique toy collector. It's my understanding that Morphe Auctions out of Adamstown, Pennsylvania, which, yes, is about 50 minutes from me. I live in Boyertown, Pennsylvania, is going to be getting this collection. I think it consists, I don't know if this is the full collection, but if I remember correctly, I think they're getting 500 to 600 pieces. That rings a bell for some reason. I will tell you, in most cases, given the fact that most of this collection isn't comprised of action figures or toys from the 1970s and 80s, it's a lot older. It's going to really not affect the market by and large. It's just one of these examples where a baby boomer is passing and now his collection's getting auctioned off. And it's going to be interesting to see the prices for some of these items because he was a well-known toy collector and enthusiast to the point where I'm sure there are collectors out there around his age, maybe a little younger, that do want to own these pieces. So I don't predict it's going to have an impact on the market per se. It's just what happens when enough individuals like this pass through time, what's going to happen to that collecting category. Because a lot of younger collectors, if they're going to go after vintage toys, they're thinking 70s, 80s, 90s toys. They're not thinking toys that were produced in the 1930s, 40s, 50s, and 60s. So if enough people like him die off, which will eventually happen, the market will transition. I do think, though, for the time being, prices will remain somewhat high just because there are still individuals left that are going after these coveted pieces. But again, most people around my age, in your 40s, hitting your early 50s, if you're collecting vintage toys, you're probably going after Star Wars, G.I. Joe, Transformers, Masters of the Universe, items from that era, rather than items from the 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s, from that time frame. So that will affect the market going forward, but we're not there yet. Keep in mind, this is just one individual that passed away, and it is sad because he was a legendary guy. He was well known throughout the trade, this particular individual, Tom Sage. It's going to be interesting to watch this particular auction just because of the provenance, with him being the owner of these pieces. So it'll be interesting to see what this auction does, but in the grand scheme of things, I don't think this one passing of this one individual, it's going to affect the market that much going forward. So we'll see what happens. Next question. Sean, why do you have an issue with artificially created scarcity? wondering if there are examples in the past that makes you think negatively about it. If demand is there and still exists 30 to 50 years down the road, does it really matter? Pokemon and new age sports cards are killing it right now. Coming from a golden age investor, truly asking, I don't have the answer. Okay, let me answer this in full. The problem with mass-produced scarcity is the fact that you cannot manufacture a collectible. As much as a lot of the modern era manufacturers want you to believe through the use of serialized cards, through the use of autographed reflector foil cards, whatever they're doing, it's very hard to produce an organic collectible over the long term. Now, does that mean these items are going to go to zero? Does it mean that no one's going to want these particular items at some point? No, it doesn't. But in my opinion, rather than paying a premium for some of this modern era garbage that is being produced just through a means of limiting the production run of said item, you'd be better off investing in a lot of the vintage pieces that we already know are scarce and potentially quote unquote rare. This idea of artificially created scarcity kind of came out of the junk wax era of sports cards. It kind of came out of the 1970s, the 1980s, where companies like the Franklin Mint, the Bradford Exchange used to advertise limited edition collector plates on late night TV infomercials to get people to part with their money, thinking that these items are going to go up in value because they only made so many. You cannot produce organic demand. And that's my problem with these items. And overall, if you would compare the trajectory of a lot of these mass-produced, limited, scarce items to that of true items that have organic collectability, you would see the items with organic collectability do better from a financial perspective. Are there exceptions to this rule? There's exceptions to every rule we can sit here and name. But overall, if you're going to invest in these markets, go after the stuff that has true organic collectability. Don't start hoarding the stuff that is artificially created because the manufacturer limited supply. Can you speculate in that stuff? Absolutely. If you're getting it at the wholesale cost or even at the retail level and you can flip it directly into the market and make money, you do you. Case in point, I'll use this as an example. I read a post on a collecting forum where a person was asking how come their copy of, I think it was Saturday Morning RPG, which was one of the very first limited run video games produced right around 2015. They have a factory sealed copy of this item. I think it came out for the PlayStation 4, if I remember correctly. Again, this was a video game, one of the very first limited run video games that were produced using mass-produced scarcity for the PlayStation 4. And they were asking, how come the item isn't selling for more on the secondary market? Well, the reason being is you answered your own question. It was artificially limited. Therefore, it did not have organic demand and organic collectability. That's why you can see some of these limited run video games that are factory sealed selling on eBay for literally close to what they sold for new when they were limited on the limited run website back in the day, whether it's 2015, 2016, 2017. Limited run has been in existence now for about 10 years. So we're starting to see a trajectory of how much these items are worth. And for those of you that are collecting these items, I told you they would never, ever have the demand and collectability as, say, a copy of Stadium Events that came out for the Nintendo Entertainment System that is now selling for tens of thousands of dollars because only a couple of thousand copies got out and then they cut production because of a licensing agreement with Nintendo, meaning the original game, Stadium Events, was no longer allowed to be manufactured. Well, as a result, that game had organic collectability. A lot of video game collectors wanted to own that game. That's why it sells for so much on the secondary market even to this day. However, you can't copy that demand simply by limiting the production run. Even if Nintendo makes an item and They tell you they're only going to produce X number of items in this category, or you have to pre-order it to get it. It has limited appeal on the secondary market because it did not have organic demand. It did not have organic collectability. And that's what a lot of these speculators don't seem to understand. In order for the item to have organic collectability, true organic demand, the item has to get in the hands of those that would want to own it, those that would want to cherish it for years to come. If you can't get the product into those individuals' hands, guess what? You have a recipe for disaster. And that's my one problem right now with what's happening with the Pokemon market in the modern era, meaning how the company has cut supply so much and demand is increasing, where people are getting in the fights at Costco, at Walmart, at Target. If they can't get the product, how are people going to covet it? How are people going to want to own it 10, 20 years from now if they couldn't get the product originally? And this is opposite of what happened with a lot of the items that we now covet on the secondary market that are selling for significant sums. Case in point, I'll use this example again. Action Comics 1, Detective Comics 27. When they first premiered in the 1930s, there were literally, go look at the print runs of those items. There were literally thousands of those items being sent to newsstands across the country. People picked them up, people read them, they threw them away. They never ever thought in a million years those items would become collectible, and they did. That's true organic collectability. True organic collectability trumps mass-produced scarcity every time. And I don't know how many people I have to explain that to. If the item was produced utilizing mass-produced scarcity, it has a limited market by nature because it does not have organic collectability or organic demand. I hope that answers your question. You go on to state, side note, I grabbed that book, Collectible Investments for the High Net Worth Investor. I paid $45. You are right. This is dry academic material, but I'm working my way through it. Yes, the book that he is talking about, do I have it? Yes, right here. Collectible Investments for the High Net Worth Investor. This is actually a financial textbook. So if you do seek this book out, let me just show you, you're going to see a lot of graphs and formulas. This book is for actually somebody that is educated in finance and wants to diversify into collectible investments. Again, what I teach on this channel is the core crux of collectible finance. So that's why I recommend this book. It is by no means not a recommendation for everybody, because some of you that get this book will really begin to question your purchase because, again, it's full of graphs, charts, and formulas. The average person really has no real reason to read this book unless they want to learn collectible finance at a master's level. So that's why I recommend this book for the few people that are watching this channel that really want to dive into this topic and they have an understanding of basic economics and finance. If you pick up this book, this will add to your knowledge of collectible finance. That's why it's always in the background of a lot of my videos. Next question. Sean, with the rate of buyer fraud increasing on eBay, isn't it too risky to put high-end collectibles for sale on the platform? In all honesty, it's up to you to assess the risk. If you want to put an item on eBay for $5,000, just keep in mind, you could potentially get scammed. Is it rare? It does happen. I wouldn't say that it's rare. It's uncommon for you to get scammed out of something that large, but it could happen. It's up to you if you want to take the risk. Me, I normally won't list an item on eBay if it's worth more than like $1,200. $1,200 is usually the cutoff for me. There for a while, I wouldn't list anything past $1,000. I kind of upped it a little bit to like $1,200 to $1,300. When we start listing items at that level, I get a little bit nervous because I feel most auction houses are capable of handling an item of that price level, and they can do it with virtually no risk. Even if I have to pay a little bit more to get them to handle it, I'm more comfortable doing that. So that would be my answer. It's just a question of risk versus reward. The benefits of selling it on eBay, if you put it up with a best offer price, you can pretty much know what it's going to sell for, meaning you can agree if somebody makes an offer, if you want to accept their offer or not. So that's one of the advantages. Second advantage is you get paid almost immediately. Let's be honest, if you consign to a major auction company and you have an item in that auction, it's probably going to take them a couple of months to advertise that auction. Then it's going to take you roughly 45 days to get paid after that. So usually in most cases, eBay is the answer. Again, simple question, risk versus reward. That's up to you. Next question. Sean, for 2025, what are the top 5 coins you suggest for an investor looking to spend between $700 and $1,000 per coin? If you're in this bracket, this is a fairly low bracket. I'm not insulting you, but when we talk about rare coins, keep in mind, there are coins that sell for millions upon millions of dollars. So if you're coming in spending $700 to $1,000 per coin, in my opinion, that is the entry point. I would tell you go after Scarcity, Morgan Silver dollars, or Peace dollars. Get them in the best condition you can find them for in your budget. You can get some Scarcity Morgan Silver dollars in like MS 64, 65 condition, even CAC stickered with that particular budget that you have just said. Now, you probably may, in some cases, go over $1,000. You may end up paying $1,200 for the coin. In my opinion, if you're going to invest in coins, it is quality over quantity. Please do not make the mistake of going into the coin market and just buying items because they are quote unquote cheap. You're going to get burnt when you go to sell. If you're collecting, truly trying to build an investment grade collection of coins, it is always quality over quantity. Eye appeal matters, grade matters, the overall appearance of the coin matters. So that's where I would tell you to start. If you want to diversify out, you can find some excellent Walking Liberty half dollars with this particular price range in excellent condition. You won't have any problem finding uncirculated Walking Liberty half dollars that are CAC stickered. That would also fit this price range. So that's where I would tell you to start. You can then branch out into other denominations. But that's where I would start. Those would be the 3. Morgan Silver dollars, Carson Cities, start there. Peace dollars, and then also Walking Liberty half dollars. Hope that answers your question. Next question. Sean, with Wizards of the Coast continuing to make controversial and unpopular decisions like the release of Magic 30 and being politically correct about their products, do you believe the company still has a viable future, both as a card game and as a collectible investment? The answer is yes. Companies make mistakes from time to time. They do stupid things. They make decisions that are not in their best interests, or they make decisions that benefit them short term at the expense of their product and brand over the long term. This happens all the time on Wall Street. I'm not going to get into it in this video. You can look that up. That's a common thing where CEOs make a decision to increase the bottom line at the expense of the company long term. It does happen, and that's what happened in this case. However, Magic the Gathering has proven itself. It is a viable collectible. I'm not going to say it's established because, again, it's only about 30 some years of age. So therefore, it is still relatively new on the collectible scene. It is speculative, but I am going to tell you, it's not going to die out tomorrow. Magic the Gathering has a long life ahead of itself. I wouldn't put it on par with Pokemon, but it's definitely number 2. So if you are going to invest in collectible card games, I would tell you to go after vintage cards of Pokemon and also Magic the Gathering. Most notoriously, of course, reserve list cards. And you guys know I like the early reserve list cards. Think Arabian Nights, think Antiquities, think Legends. That's the stuff that I like. Now, if you're going to ask me, where will Magic the Gathering be in 20 to 30 years from now? I couldn't honestly comprehend answering that question. Do I still think it'll be around? Yes, it already survived more than 30 years. So why wouldn't it survive another 10 or 20? It's not going to go away overnight. So if you're worried about that, that is not going to happen. Every single collecting category that is popular right now, whether it's Star Wars, whether it's Lego, whether it's Nintendo, whether it's Pokemon, whether it's toys, comic books, whatever, the company's in charge. have made some boneheaded decisions. As long as it doesn't torpedo the brand, you're okay. With what happened with Magic the Gathering and the release of the 30th anniversary decision and some of the other decisions they made, it hurt the brand, but they're able to recover. It's not something where it's going to go to zero overnight, so you don't have to worry there. With that being said, that concludes part 4 of the 18,000 subscriber Q&A series. Part 5 will be uploaded to YouTube soon. Thank you for watching. If you get anything out of this content, please consider subscribing to this channel. I will see you in the next video.